Today, I'm going to be taking 10 popular fitness claims that are misleading you and might be ruining your progress. So if you go ahead and fix these few things and apply these few things, you're going to be able to gain at a faster rate with less time in the gym and a lot less stress on your hands. Interestingly enough, they all fall into the subcategories of training, nutrition, or planning. First, we're going to debunk a couple of these training statements that might be harmful. The first one is if you're not sore, you're not trying. If we think about soreness, it is a symptom that is caused by something, and there are several things that can cause soreness. One thing can be muscle overuse, and this would be generally bad. Another one would be muscle tears, which is actually your muscles repairing and how your muscles get bigger. So muscle tears leading to soreness would be a great thing that might happen from your lifting. Something that might cause those muscle tears is just something novel. This is where it gets a little tricky. Soreness could mean you hit something really, really well because it does mean that muscle is tearing and repairing. However, it might be sore mainly more because it's novel. And this doesn't necessarily mean it's growing, it just means it's something new. So with soreness, it could be an indicator that you hit something very well. It could be an indicator that maybe you need to take a step back. And it could be an indicator that a new exercise you tried works really well with your mind-muscle connection. But all of these things don't point to a definite road. Soreness equals gains, or the absence of soreness means the absence of gains. It's just not true, and it shouldn't be your best proxy for figuring out if something was a good exercise for muscle growth. Another training myth that I've seen is people saying that lifting is going to reduce your flexibility and mobility. This is so far from true if you do a few things properly. Well, if we want to do something that helps our flexibility, a full range of motion would be taking us through the full range of motion that we would call flexibility, and then having a stretch on the eccentric portion can actually help a ton. And of course, the other part of flexibility is you can even stretch post-workout just to ensure that it's all still there, and that's a perfectly viable thing you can do. Now, being mobile is a completely new thing. Something anecdotal is that when I started doing my leg work without shoes on, I noticed my foot strength went up and then my mobility went up. So I would start to look at your foot. That is from my personal experience. But two things I can tell you for certain is doing mobility work like sprints or plyometrics are literally using your muscles as fast as you can, and that's going to help your mobility. And something else I found is lateral motion, like monster walks, or kind of doing lateral bounds, because those are going to help your side to side instead of just your front and back. So by just doing these things that aren't even hard to implement, this myth can really just be busted. And the third training myth that is absolutely destroying your gains is thinking your abs are different from another muscle. If you were to train your bicep, you would expect it to grow when you did progressive overload, 6 to 20 rep range, and a stretch emphasis. However, when people start to think about their abs, it is all too common where we get caught into those really big circuit workouts where you're doing 45 bicycles and then 50 sit-ups and then a bunch of stuff at your body weight and not really applying progressive overload. And essentially, you're basically doing none of these things that grow your bicep and you're expecting another muscle to grow. It makes no logical sense. If you want your abs to grow and your abs to show, you have to treat them like every other muscle using progressive overload and all the other things I listed. And now we're going to go into 3 nutritional myths that I think are really important for you to hear about. First one is that supplements are going to change your life. There is one supplement that will have a lot to do with muscle growth, and that is steroids, and something that you should never take. So if we're just talking about natural lifting, another thing that's going to come up is going to be creatine. This is a very safe supplement, and it kind of makes a 1 to 3% difference. If you're not lifting hard on your own, creatine isn't going to solve your issues. And little micronutrients like vitamin D, magnesium, so on, might help you feel better, but they might not contribute very much to muscle growth, something in about, a 1% range. So supplements are really only going to make a 1 to 3% difference depending on how good you are at lifting. And the better you are at lifting, arguably the marginal difference they'll give you is going to be less. And the next one is that you have to eat big to get big. You do have to eat in a surplus over an extended period of time to build a lot of muscle onto your frame. It does not mean your surplus has to be 600 calories a day, where you end up actually gaining a lot of fat mass and then you have to spend an extended period in a cut, which is kind of bad for your body and a bunch of other stuff. So if you actually just kind of take it slow, take it at a healthier approach, it's going to be a slower process, but it's actually going to be more efficient and you're going to save yourself so much struggle. And the third nutritional myth is actually about plant versus animal protein. Animal proteins are complete, which basically means they have all the amino acids, while almost every plant protein is going to be incomplete, but when you pair different plants together and their plant proteins, you actually get complete proteins, like when you mix lentils and rice. And most plant protein powders then fulfill this ratio by taking from a few different sources. So as long as you're being a little intelligent, your plant incomplete protein will be a full protein. So something you need to be aware of is just because something's plant protein doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. The only time it's bad is if you're seeing something ultra processed or just like a little bit of plant protein added to a pasta mix that's just basically useless. So take this understanding and just know that just because it's plant protein doesn't mean it's incomplete and useless. And now we're gonna speed through 4 of the biggest planning myths I see. And the reason these 4 myths I think are the most important is your planning is everything. Plan is your intention. If your intention isn't there, it's gonna suck. If your intention sucks, it's gonna suck. If your intention is great, it's gonna be amazing. So how do we get our intention straight? The first one is, are more sets better? The answer is sometimes. You, as an individual, are gonna exist somewhere on this graph. And on this graph, it has a parabola shape. There's a certain amount of sets per your whole body and per muscle group, which is systemic and local fatigue respectively, where you're gonna be in an optimal range. And your goal is to find this, and it's not very hard. It's usually between 12 and 20, depending on how many you take to failure and how many total sets you're doing as an aggregate. And there's many ways to tell if you're overtraining that won't be in this video, but you can find very, very easily. But the main point is that there's a certain amount of sets you want to do. If you're doing under that, you might be preserving muscle and not growing muscle. And if you're over that, you are wasting time and actually getting in your own way. And piggybacking onto that, the second thing people ignore is their systemic fatigue. A lot of people are really good about tracking, I'm doing this many sets per quads, this many per hamstring, and they're growing, and then there's also with this amount of chest, but you have to think your body as a whole system. Locally, everything can feel fine, but if you're doing a ton of compound movements and not resting properly, your systemic fatigue can be super, super high. And the reason this is a planning issue is that it's because of a lack of overall recovery. And if you don't address this, you're gonna burn out and your stuff is gonna all start crashing down into plateaus. So make sure your whole body is recovering, not just local muscle groups. The third thing is gonna have to do with exercise selection. Common myth is that you have to use the bench press, squat, deadlifts, and compound lifts. I agree that compound lifts are awesome, but if your bench press doesn't feel comfortable on your shoulder, a deficit push-up or even a dumbbell press is equally, if not more effective than that barbell bench press if your goal is muscle growth. And the same thing can apply for squats and belt squats. And the same thing is sort of similar with deadlifts and good mornings. There's always ways around it as long as you're replacing it with a different type of compound lift and always centering each workout around one. And the final thing about planning that I wish I knew was a myth when I started was that you had to do these super common splits like push-pull legs, bro split. That just doesn't work for some people and it works for others. And what you have to do is learn yourself and learn your schedule. I found doing something that was a mix between push-pull legs and full body was really, really awesome for me, and I was able to manage my recovery really well. This takes a little bit of practice and maybe even a little outside consultation like I had. There's always plenty of people open for that. You can always DM me on Instagram if you feel like you need help with this specifically. And if you want more easy fitness content like this, subscribe for more.